Hello, all, and welcome to another episode of the Triple H podcast, Happy Hour Hoops, your one stop shop for enjoying a cold beverage and listening to our ice cold basketball takes. We got you covered on everything NBA all the time. Donovan Holden here, as always, with my guy Jake, Micah. And today we have a full slate of things to go over, so much news, so many moving parts, and we're going to talk about the league's future as a whole and kind of, how these playoffs are foreshadowing what this league is going to look like, the next 10 plus years. So a lot to dive into, but before we do that, a word from our sponsor over at Manscaped. Guys, it's that time of year. I keep saying it, manscaped.com. You're going to want to go over there, get the body trimmers, get the nose trimmers, clean yourself up for the summer so you're not looking like a hairy slob on the beach. You want to be clean shaven for the ladies. Get it all out there, looking good. Head over to manscaped.com. Use the code word TRAINWRECK at checkout. You will receive 20% off and free shipping. That is the code word TRAINWRECK for 20% off and free shipping. But Jake, we have some basketball to talk about. And what do you want to start with here? We want to start with the news from today?
Yeah, let's start with the news and notes from today. Before we get into it, we both woke up this morning. I was just expecting a nice let's celebrate the Kevin Durant performance. I guess let's start with good news. Kevin Durant last night had a performance for the ages. 49 points, 17 rebounds, 10 assists, 3 blocks, 2 steals, willing the Brooklyn Nets to a victory over the Milwaukee Bucks. Donnie, it was. I think, we talked about it in the preview yesterday, this is a Durant legacy game, and he showed out and showed up in every sense of the word.
Yeah, I mean, literally no doubt. That's exactly what he did. I was expecting a huge game from KD, but I didn't think it would be this big because we had Harden coming back. And Harden was kind of non-existent. I don't want to say he didn't have an impact because he absolutely did. And we touched on it before last night's game. Even just him being out there would free up some offense for Durant. Obviously that happened. Harden made some unbelievable passes down the stretch, which allowed them to creep back into that game in the third quarter. But yes, Durant showed up in his quote-unquote legacy game, put the team on his back. We mentioned it. Barstool Sports mentioned it. Looked like he was at Rucker Park last night. But yeah, I mean, all things clicking for KD, and it was just great to see. Like I can honestly say that was top 3 single player best performances I've seen in my lifetime. Just sitting down and watching a game, like I truly enjoyed that so much. Kevin Durant has been one of my favorite players since his college days at Texas, and it was just a treat to watch. I mean, anyone who truly enjoys the game of basketball, that's played on the hardwood, that's played with an orange ball, like that is the epitome of it right there. That it was just such an unbelievable single player performance. And not that it was a selfish performance by any means. I mean, he literally got his teammates involved, played defense. I mean, it was just everything you could ask for.
Yeah, it was beautiful to watch. He tweeted out during Dame's blow up game in round 1. This is a spiritual experience, and that was a spiritual Kevin Durant experience. He channeled that energy. It was awesome. So yeah, that was last night. We'll get more into that preview tomorrow for Game 6, huge Game 6 in Milwaukee, with a 3-2 Nets lead, looking to move on to the conference finals. But then after last night, we end up with a bunch of bad news just barraged onto our Twitter timeline in the morning, starting with Kawhi Leonard, which had a couple different developments. It was said that he's out for Game 5 and potentially the rest of the series with what they were calling a right knee sprain. Now the rumor out there is that it is a ACL injury. We don't know the severity of it, but Kawhi out. When this pod is out tomorrow for the live listeners, we don't know how this is going to look for the Clippers tonight in a huge Game 5 in Utah. But going forward, I mean, it's just tough to see another one of these stars going down injured. This time, Kawhi Leonard is coming off a beautiful performance. And then Chris Paul, out with health and safety protocols potentially testing positive for COVID. That's unconfirmed reports right now, but we haven't figured that out yet.
Yeah,
But
that's kind of the buzz. I mean, it's still
yeah.
alleged, but apparently, allegedly, Chris Paul has COVID. Yeah, continue.
Yeah, no, that's pretty much it. He's in the health and safety protocol, and we should have figured that it was going to come, even with vaccinations up and everything, that it was going to come along and infiltrate the NBA playoffs at some point. But extremely unfortunate that it's Chris Paul. The storyline, has been about Chris Paul and his sons. They've been the story of the playoffs, and I don't know, Donnie. Just how did you react to just all this, both these things coming at you this morning, and what do you think about it going forward for both these teams?
Yeah, very, very strange. It just really sucks. I was enjoying these playoffs a lot. I think, we've seen a fair share of injuries before this and guys missing time and, LeBron taking an early exit. Even, I was upset my Boston Celtics took an early exit, even though that wasn't much of a surprise. But I still thought there was a lot to love about these playoffs. I mean, I thought some of the first round series were great. I thought the second round series have been amazing. Chris Paul and the Suns sweeping the Nuggets was awesome. Jokic, he had his MVP performances in the first round, but just clearly not enough to get it done. And there was just so much more good basketball left to be played, and there still is, but it's just a guy like Kawhi Leonard, just how hot he was starting to come on in these playoffs, him going down, and then Chris Paul, a guy who really everyone is rooting for to get to the NBA Finals, playing nearly perfect and I'm talking perfect basketball, dude. Like he had a game last week where he had 17 assists and 0 turnovers. Like, come on now, that is. It really hurts to see this stuff happen. If you're a basketball fan, if you're an NBA fan, especially if the Clippers or the Suns are your team, this was just it was someone stabbing you with a knife and then twisting it while it was in there. As one piece of bad news after another today. It is part of the game. But it just never good news. No matter how many times someone says that it's part of the game, it's part of it never makes it better. Of course it is, but yeah, it was just really tough to see on Twitter today. And hopefully, Kawhi, it sounds a lot worse. Hopefully, the Clippers and Jazz series can extend at least maybe a week or a little less than that, and Chris Paul can come back quicker than normal because he is vaccinated. I don't know. There's a lot of moving parts here. Let's hope that Chris Paul is back on the court for the next series and hope that this Kawhi injury is not too serious. But that's about all we can do right now.
Yeah, it was just a crazy couple hours there, getting that news coming in, and hope for the best for both of them. Obviously, kind of extremely different situations, but still hope that they both are okay in the long run and that they can get back on the court as soon as possible. But maybe we'll get into that later. Maybe that's been part of the issue to begin with about getting back on the court with all these injuries and everything going forward. So yeah, the other news of the day, not very surprising. I guess one was more surprising than the other. Scott Brooks out in Washington, which I don't think that is very surprising. Washington's got a lot of decisions to make going forward. Bradley Beal with a year left and was pretty non-committal in his exit interview. They've got Russell Westbrook there, but what's the point of having Russell Westbrook without a Bradley Beal? So it's just a lot of decisions on the future coming forward with the Wizards, and Scott Brooks is not going to be a part of that future. And I think it was about time for that. He wasn't getting as much out of those guys as you would think, and it wasn't a great run the last couple of years. So Scott Brooks out. The more shocking one to me, Dunny, was Stan Van Gundy out after a year in New Orleans. Yeah. But honestly, like, the Pelicans were what we talked about it. They've been one of the most disappointing. They were one of the most disappointing teams this year, and it's clear that a lot of that had to do with what Stan Van Gundy, the way he was able to relate to those players. Because you have to think, like, if Ingram and Zion were Van Gundy guys and were in his corner, like, this wouldn't be an issue. He'd still be the coach. So you got to think that it's got to be some disconnect between him and the players as a coach who's been around for a long time and kind of trying to get back into the coaching game.
Yeah, Scott Brooks, like you said, not as surprising. Van Gundy, very surprising. But kind of the way the season ended for them, not so much. Just because, I mean, their whole season was kind of a dumpster fire, for being honest. I
Yeah.
remember I would say much more high on the Pelicans than probably the average NBA fan. But me and you, I think we both had some pretty high expectations for this team. Maybe not atop the Western Conference, but I thought they would at least be fighting for a playoff spot. At the very least, be in the play-in tournament, and they just did not find themselves even close to that. I thought they had, a good coach in Stan. I thought they had great talent across the board, pretty good depth, a lot of grit and grind guys, defenders, shooters. And, I think we're just getting to the point where the league's so loaded with talent sometimes, and we're seeing it a lot kind of recently, that talent up and down the roster just isn't always the answer right now, and it's not going to win you games and get you to the playoffs. And this Pelicans team was a prime example of that. So I'd be surprised if Stan, kind of parting ways with New Orleans is the first of many moves for this Pelicans team this offseason.
Yeah, definitely, and a lot of pressure with a budding young superstar, and the more power these superstars get, like you got to build winners around these guys, around Ingram and Zion. Like there's a lot of talent in the league. It's not, like you said, that's not enough to get by, but with the kind of talent they have on that team, they should have been in better position. And they were a horrible defensive team this year, and that's what Stan Van Gundy was supposed to be. His calling card was defense, right? And it never happened. So he's out. We got 6 coach openings now. None of them have been filled yet. It's going to be interesting to see kind of how the carousel plays out. And I know we touched on that a little bit yesterday too, but let's get into it for the rest of the pod here. As we're going to shift into more of a conversation just about the league as a whole, because I think we've touched on this topic a little bit during the playoffs and everything, but it's really been a coming out party for a lot of superstars. And we saw, the LeBron and the Lakers out in the first round to Phoenix, and that kind of has opened the door. It's the first time in, I think they said it was the first time in the last 10, 11 years that we haven't had LeBron or Curry in a finals. So we're getting fresh faces no matter what happens in the finals. Obviously, depending on the severity of Kawhi's injury, he's the other name that he's kind of spot dutied in the last 10 years. He won't be there either. So really it comes down to what we want to talk about here is not focusing on LeBron, and obviously he's been the face of the league since 2004, 2005. I mean, battling with Kobe back for late 2000s there, and then just taking the league by storm and pretty much dominated everything. But Dunny, let's you start off here with, we've got all these young stars coming forward. Do you think that are you feeling the same shift, and who are the kind of guys that you think are going to take over for that mantle?
I'm putting on my shades, guys, because the future's bright. I'm putting on my shades because the future is bright in the league, guys. I mean, it's crazy because, we've had this one guy being LeBron, who is just the clear-cut head and shoulders above everyone else. Really not an argument as far as who's the face of the league. And I think we're just and maybe I'm speaking too early, and I think, so what if I am, just because even if we are speaking a little too soon and LeBron does have one of those seasons left in the tank, like these guys who I'm about to mention deserve their credit. And, maybe we do have an in-between period where it's not LeBron and it's not necessarily one of these young guys in particular, but it's a combination of Durant and Leonard maybe back again next year, and he goes to to get another championship. But I think it's just great what we've seen from these playoffs so far, and that's kind of what I was alluding to earlier. I'm not really that upset with the playoffs this year. Of course, no one wants to see the injuries. I'm upset about that, but as far as what we've already seen and how much more is still left to go, I mean, in the first round, Luka having just some of the most unbelievable playoff performances the league's ever seen. Tatum having 90 points in 2 games against one of the best basketball teams, or talented basketball teams the league's ever seen. So just those 2 guys off the bat, like those are 2 guys who, 2-3 years down the road could be the face of the league on their own. I think Luka has the leg up there right now, but Tatum's got the build for it. Those are just 2 guys off the top of my head who don't really have the pieces around them right now, but clearly, that's going to be Dallas's first thing to do this summer, and same with Boston to surround Tatum with some more talent. And then you look at guys who do kind of have some talent around them already and are still fighting to get to the championship. 2 guys from the Western Conference, Donovan Mitchell and Devin Booker. These are 2 other names that are kind of going to be sharing the face of this league for years to come. And the league's just in such good hands. And I think these playoffs this year have been a testament to that. Do I know who the face is going to be, for the next decade? Is it going to be one person like LeBron James? Who knows? But just those guys off the top of my head, who they stood out in the playoffs this year. Even Ja Morant in the first round. I mean, they didn't really have a competitive series against the Utah Jazz, but man, there's just so much great young talent in the league, and I'm excited for it.
Yeah, man, and it's the 4 guys that we've kind of mentioned here and cornered on. I mean, you can kind of discuss Trae Young in there. I think some people would. I'm not ready to do that, but I think that people would. I think that other people would put him in that conversation. Mm-hmm. I don't want to make Meerkat angry, so Nikola Jokic has to be mentioned too. But I just don't think that. I don't think that he'll ever be, because when you're thinking about the face of the league, it's going to be a guy that they're going to throw all their support behind, and I just don't ever see that being Jokic. I just can't see it. Not in Denver, not the way that he looks and is, and it's never happened before, and I just don't see it happening going forward. We didn't mention Giannis at all, and I think that's due to the fact that we touched on at the beginning with the KD having his legacy superstar game. Well, what did we see from Giannis? The biggest moment from Giannis last night in that game was him fumbling the ball away with under 10 seconds left with a chance to tie the game. And that's kind of been that play was kind of the epitome of Giannis's career, is getting right there, and then somehow Milwaukee or the team around him or himself not coming up in those big moments. And that shit gets held against you when we're talking about being the face of the NBA, right? Like throughout history, like that, those are the moments that the NBA has built upon. Like the legend of Michael Jordan, when we're growing up, me and you growing up, both being early 20s, whatever, and you hear, like, obviously we didn't get to watch Michael Jordan live all the time and everything. And the legend of it is that he always came through in the clutch, right? And the same thing with Kobe, like growing up, like it was Kobe, like Kobe was the guy you would go to in the clutch and everything. And LeBron's gotten a lot of hate over that over his career, but that's more to do with the hype and just the kind of divisiveness that LeBron James has just had. But he's also been great in those moments in his career, clearly. And it's got to be somebody that can have that kind of effect. So then the 4 guys that we've mentioned all have done that in some varying degree. Like we know Luka can hit those big shots and show up in those big moments. We know Mitchell can show up in those big moments. We know Booker has shown up in the big moments that he's had so far. Tatum's been doing it since his rookie year. Like he's been in big. It was Dunny. I'm sorry to bring this up to you, but it was 3 years ago today that Tatum was in a Game 7 against LeBron James to go to the finals and dunked on LeBron James in that game. Like he was not afraid of that moment ever either. And so it's going to be one of those guys, but as you touched on too, Booker and Mitchell have the teams around them. Tatum doesn't have the team. He has the superstar teammate, but he doesn't have the rest of the team around him. Luka, the drama in Dallas right now is kind of crazy. The president of basketball operations is gone now. Donnie Nelson, legendary coach and executive in the league, no longer with the Mavericks. He's been there since 2005. And there's just a lot of drama surrounding a guy named Haralabos Voulgaris, which I've followed Haralabos for a while now because I'm an avid listener of Bill Simmons and everything. He used to show up on there all the time. He's just a big NBA gambler, analytic guy, and got this job within the Mavs front office. And the front office just doesn't respect him, and it doesn't seem like they don't respect his decisions. Apparently, the story from the other day from The Athletic was said that he's having input on lineup decisions and things going over Rick Carlisle's head, and that Luka just doesn't care for the guy at all. And so all these scenarios can play out, and it's going to be dependent on the situation, how well insulated these guys are. All that being said, if we're talking about who the next face of the league is after LeBron James, and it might not, like you said, it might be a bridge guy. It might not be a guy that originally takes over. It's got to be Kevin Durant. I mean, I think Kevin Durant, I think it would have been Kevin Durant I think, honestly, we'll look back in history and think it more that it is Kevin Durant from 2017 on after he signs with the Warriors, but he was just never going to get that credit when he went and signed with that team. But really, that's when it kind of all shifted. I mean, he beat LeBron twice in the finals after that, and then obviously got injured, but they were well on their way to another finals. And then it remains to be seen what happens this year, but we're coming off the most legendary performance he's ever had in his career. He had a game score higher than the best LeBron, Michael Jordan, or Kobe Bryant game in history yesterday. So I think it's KD, and then he's only 32, and really his game's not slowing down anywhere. He's in the biggest market in the world. I just don't know if there's another answer besides Kevin Durant.
Yeah, I think I completely agree with that, where we've it's like almost like a transition period, but KD almost got screwed before the transition period anyway, just because of how good he was and how long LeBron was just stretching on his amazing run of just being the greatest and being at the top of the league. And as you mentioned, there's some hiccups or speed bumps or whatever you want to call them in KD's legacy. And it's a lot due to the media and, putting shame on him for forming these super teams. And then the injury just at a really poor time where he could have gone for, like you said,
three-peat.
Going for that just casual three-peat there. So it's a little strange, but it's true. And that's just the way it worked out. But yeah, I think you're absolutely right. I think once LeBron takes even more of a fall off and we see a steady decline, I think KD is still on the rise for a few more years. I mean, the version of KD we saw last night was arguably the best I've ever seen. I mean, it looked straight out of his MVP season and maybe even a little better than that. And I'm guilty of this. I think a lot of people who analyze the game of basketball are guilty of this, said, KD does not look the same defensively. He's coming off a very tough injury on his leg. He looked incredible on defense last night. I mean, he was blocking Chris Middleton's shot like as he was elevating for jumpers. He was getting in the middle of passing lanes. I mean, the dude still has like an 8-foot wingspan. Like he's gonna steal some passes out there in the passing lanes. So yeah, I think KD right now. But I want to ask you if, say we're 2 years down the road, or KD, maybe not 2 years, but 2, 3, 4 years down the road, and KD does start to decline, and you have to pick someone other than KD if he doesn't. Say we're talking real life, like 2K cover athlete for like, I don't know, the next 5 to 8 years. And maybe it isn't one guy. Maybe we truly are seeing one of one in LeBron, and this will really never happen again. That's very possible. But who do you, out of the guys we talked about, or maybe it's someone different, maybe it's a Zion, someone we haven't brought up yet, who do you see being that guy if there is one moving forward?
Well, you just said his name right there. I think it's Zion going forward. I think that Zion has been, as Luka, Mitchell, Booker, Tatum, Trae Young, any of those other young guys, they have all been built around much better than Zion to emphasize their strengths. It's damn near criminal the last 2 years that New Orleans has not just done. I mean, the handling of whatever happened with his injury, his rookie year and everything, it was weird at the time. We didn't know what was going on. But the bursts that we've seen from Zion and Point Zion this year who showed up he's utterly dominant, and he's still a baby. Like he still doesn't even know what he's like capable of yet. I think that's the most terrifying thing, is that he's just starting to figure out like how dominant he can be. He clearly has the vision and the basketball IQ to be like running at the point and doing like initiating offense. And that's the difference between him and like a Giannis. Like we see Giannis in these situations where he should not be making decisions with the basketball. Like he just doesn't have that IQ. And I was listening to a podcast earlier that made a really good point about that with Giannis. He really hasn't played enough basketball to be in those types of situations. Like he started basketball late. He wasn't playing in a high level of basketball before he came to the league. He came to the league and then had to sit for most of those first couple of years because he was such a raw product. He just hasn't had those reps that a guy like Zion or Mitchell or Tatum has had in AAU their whole life, and then high level high school basketball, and then D1 college basketball, and just like it's a different level, and it's just the reps. It's the 10,000 hours of being in a high pressure situation with a gym with 17,000 screaming people, 10,000 screaming people at you. Like the joke about Giannis was that all the video was him like in some gym, like with grainy ass, like standard definition video with like 13 people in the crowd and everything. But it's just different. It's a different feel. And we've talked about that the whole playoffs, that you can tell like these games just feel so much different because these crowds are full and you can see how it affects some of these guys. All that being said, I think that Zion is, out of everybody that we've touched on, he's the most talented. He's the complete package. And hopefully they get the right coach in there to accentuate his strengths and really just build this team and build their offense around what Zion does well. Because I think when that happens and as he starts to figure it out, I really don't see a way that they can stop him.
No, and that's a fantastic point. I've really never thought about it like that, and that's kind of how we should be judging this. I mean, you know, you think back to the early days of people's careers and, you know, people playing the AAU tournaments, and they are in packed gyms for their high school games. Like that's a reality. And, you know, we talk about Zion in this conversation. We talk about Giannis and we talk about LeBron, all freaks of nature, all unbelievable athletes, but it comes down to experience. And yeah, I mean, these are guys who have, and we're not even just talking about the levels they played at and the competition they played against. Like, even if you want to break it down even further, like LeBron and Zion were seen at a young age that they were almost the chosen ones of where they came out of, and where they didn't play the point guard role probably for their respective teams growing up. They were just given the ball and said, you know, kind of do what you want with it. So they even just had that particular experience too, of just having the ball in their hand the whole time, being the go-to guy. I mean, look at Zion, dude. We grew up in high school, like watching this kid years younger than us, and like I remember watching like videos and like vines of Zion dunking when I was in class. And
that's the thing. He was like the biggest, like he's like the first ever like full-on Instagram celebrity, basketball celebrity, right? Like
there's like Mikey Williams now, but it was Zion big time when we were in school and like our early college days. It's like, what, this kid's 14 and he's doing that? Like, so yeah, I mean, it's just the you know, the exposure, and LeBron and Zion got it, and Giannis. I mean, no one's taking anything away from Giannis. Like, he has an unbelievable story of where he came from and where he's at. His brothers are in the league now, sharing the hardwood with him. It's incredible. But I mean, if we're talking Giannis being in that conversation with LeBron and, you know, being the next guy up, I don't think that's fair to say. And of course, there's still more of his career to come, so I don't want to sell him short. Maybe he could get there, but I don't think a lot of people are going to put stock in, you know, Giannis being the next guy.
So who do you have for in that next 5 year range before we wrap up? The same question that you posed to me, I would like to pose to you. We both think it's KD's world and we've been living in it. Who are you going with, and why is it Jason Tatum? I
really want to say Tatum here, and I think it's going to take a little bit, but I really do think it's going to be him, man. Like it could so easily be Luka, but I think even people who are Mavericks fans and people who, you know, can speak the highest of high about Luka can see right now that even though there's things that he does better than Tatum, and I think right now, if, you know, we kind of just had to pause this, you know, where the NBA world's at right now and say, who's it going to be? I wouldn't blame people for saying Luka. I just think Tatum has a little bit more potential to do everything better than not everything better than Luka, but just have a more complete game. Like he's just built for defense. He has better length. He has better strength and athleticism. Like I don't know. Tatum to me just has a little bit more of the it factor, if you ask me. I think Luka's talented. He's so crafty. He's getting people have been saying he's the closest thing we've seen since Larry Bird, and everyone knows, how high his IQ was and how crafty he was. I just think, Tatum models his game so much after Kobe. He kind of has that Mamba mentality in him. We've seen it. You talked about it, the dunk on LeBron in a Game 7 as a rookie. And, I mean, just the multiple 50-point games this year, I really think it could be Tatum. Also, of course, there's some bias coming out of this conversation. But, I think I'd be a little silly not to roll with my guy here.
No, I'm with you, and I think honestly it comes down to a lot of personal preference in a player the way that we project this out, because like Zion and Luka are more of a LeBron mold, right? Like just the freak, like the high IQ. They kind of do everything right now. That they're filling the stat sheet, whatever else. But then you have like a Booker and a Tatum and those vein of guys where it falls more into like a Durant and Kobe, like just pure scorer. Like they have everything in their arsenal. They can make every move, can do everything on the offensive side of the floor. And I think that you're exactly right. Where Tatum could get Luka and even Zion is that he has shown that he is a dominant defensive player and can be a dominant defensive player and should have been and will be considered more often for all NBA, just the way that he puts the work in and just the size that he has and the will to go out and do that. So yeah, I set you up for your biased answer, but I also agree. I think that Jason Tatum the sky is the limit for him, and it really has just been a lack of team building around them that he's had to feel like he has to do so much, right? And I think he carries more of a burden than he should have to if they were going to be able to accentuate his talents better. So before we wrap up, Dunny, it's been 13 years since anything is possible. Can you give me your best anything is possible?
Oh, I don't know if I could do that on the spot.
Anything is possible.
That was Jake, and that actually could have been Kevin Garnett, because that was awesome.
That's rung in my head over like for all of time. Like I'll never forget that. Anytime I'll like yell that randomly if I'm saying like anything's possible. That's all that goes in my head.
Yeah, no,
that's a good day. It's a good day in Celtics history, obviously. That's why I felt I could bring up the LeBron Game 7 from a couple years ago, because really, like, they ended up losing that title, so whatever.
Mad at the time, dude, but like I'm honestly glad that game happened. Like, the odds are stacked against the Celtics anyway. They shouldn't have really even been in a Game 7 in that series. Like I said, upset that we took the loss, and I kind of had high hopes that we were going to win that game then. But I think it's a nice memory to look back on.
Yeah.
Although if we keep having seasons like we had this year, from now on, I probably won't have the same cheery mood about that. But yeah, it's great. I love the anything possible. I think people think that's corny, dude. But like, come on, dude, that's KG, a guy who pours like the most intensity into the game like we've probably ever seen. Like maybe outside of like Dennis Rodman. And Michael Jordan and Kobe had like their own version of it, but I think that was pure. Like it seems a little goofy, but I think that was just like the purest form of KG we'll ever see.
Just the passion, and right, and I mean, like you imagine being stuck in Minnesota for 11 years and then winning an NBA title. Like, of course you're going to be that. That's how you're going to feel, right? Like Exactly. He probably never thought he was going to be anywhere near that situation. Yeah, but yeah, that was a great moment in NBA history. Good for KG, good for you. I'm sure that little Dunny was super excited on that day. I remember watching it at home too. It was a fun time. But yeah, that'll do it for this pod here. So follow us at Happy Hour Hoops 1. Follow Trainwreck Sports at Trainwreck Spurts without the O there. We keep at it. We'll be back again tonight if you're listening to this pod today with another preview for Bucks Nets game 6, and we'll know what happened from tonight's game. So all right, before we go, let's just wrap with our future predictions, tomorrow's headlines. I've got Hawks. I've got Ice Tray going off for 40. Hawks win 110-95. And I've got the Jazz blowing out the Clippers 135-90. Something bad.
45-point victory.
Yep. I don't.
Yeah.
No trust in Kawhi-less Clippers.
These aren't just headlines, man. These are headlines, bold font everywhere, billboards. Yeah, I knew you. I also knew you had the Hawks. I didn't know you were gonna have that game a blowout too. I'm going 76ers in a tight one. I'm going 107-105 Sixers. And I agree with you. I don't think it'll be quite 45 points, but I think a 20-point blowout for the Utah Jazz is realistic. I think maybe a little 131-112.
Like it. I like
Utah
that.
Jazz.
I think it's going to be a high without Kawhi out there. I think to mess with Mitchell at all, like he has been the last couple games. I think it's going to be one of those high-scoring games. And if the Clippers can shoot, that'll be the difference. But we'll see what happens. All right, so that'll do it here. Thank you all for joining us. We'll be back tomorrow. Bucks Nets game 6 coming up. Appreciate y'all. Have a great night.